You're listening to the Deep Purple Podcast, a fan podcast about one of the most legendary bands of all time, Deep Purple. We take a look at the music, history, and people behind the band Deep Purple and beyond. Welcome to the Deep Purple Podcast, the first and only podcast devoted to one of the greatest rock bands in history, Deep Purple. Today's episode is episode number 16, Before They Were Purple, Part 3, Hughes and Coverdale. And coming to you from the suburbs of Chicago, I'm your host, Nathan Beaudry.
And from the biggest little state in the nation, I'm your co-host, John Basher Matola.
Oh, Basher, that's a good one. It's very fierce.
Yeah.
Coming from the biggest little state too, and we got we officially, this is a big moment for the podcast because we had our first offer for somebody to buy us a beer, to buy you a beer, because
I know
they must be close. I guess they're going to the show at Mohegan Sun.
Yeah.
So they said, I guess so I get an email that says, tell John Matola I'll buy him a beer.
Yeah, which is awesome.
If he's at the Mohegan Sun show, so
I will not be most likely. If I am, I'll take you up on it. But
who is it that's playing again?
I don't know. Did he say?
He did. Let me look it up real quick. So he says.
I mean, it wasn't Deep Purple, was it? I don't think
he
they're
said,
going.
it's a longtime friend who was going to the Purple show at Mohegan Sun in October. Oh, maybe when Purple's playing at Mohegan Sun.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even look at that when I looked at potential shows for us to attend. I looked for the one in Boston and then the one that's out here by me, which is almost in Chicago, like right outside.
Well, I mean, the Mohegan one would be cool because it's a smaller venue.
Mm-hmm. Well, ours is at the one around here is at the Rosemont Theater, which I've never been to, but it's right by O'Hare.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but
well, either way, if we make it out to that one, then sir, we will take you up on that. And if anybody else is in the Providence area and wants to buy me a beer, email Nate.
I have to I'm gonna be running, organizing this and doing logistics for you to get a free beer. I'm like, here's his email. I'll give him your phone number. Here, call him.
But I would love, I love to sit around and talk about music, and it'd be cool to go to shows and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll meet anybody anywhere within a certain radius.
And I've, growing up in Rhode Island, well, Mohegan Sun was kind of built when we were older, but I've never been to Mohegan Sun. I've driven by it like a million times, but
yeah, it's pretty cool. Better than Foxwoods.
Yeah, because Foxwoods was like a few years before that, right? Mohegan Sun was like a little bit more.
Yeah. From what I hear is that like more people prefer that one. Anybody not from the Northeast, they were talking about two casinos, which are both in Connecticut, which are relatively close.
But they're right over the border, because that side of Connecticut, there's like that half of Connecticut, there's basically like no population. So it's basically made to serve Rhode Island. It's right over the line so that they can have the gambling casinos and all that.
Pretty much, which, I mean, we have Twin River Casino, which is literally 5 minutes down the street from me, but that's not.
And that's where you saw Whitesnake, right?
And that's, which is where I saw Whitesnake a little while ago, but it's not quite up to the level of the other places, but it's still having it in such close proximity to my house gives me a break on taxes, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. So
but anyway, on to business.
Yeah, on to business. Thanks to our patrons, we got a new patron.
Cool.
Peter Gardeau with joining us at the $3 tier. Thank you, Peter. And he's the one who is, offering to get you a drink, and we appreciate that. And we also
appreciate all of it.
Clay Wambacher and Steve Seaborg at alltheworldsastage.net. So thank you for those patrons coming in at 3 patrons. Look at that.
Woo-hoo, we're getting there.
Yeah, we're definitely coming on the scene now. And we're, I've stopped checking. I used to obsessively refresh the page to see how many hits we get every day. 2 more people listened, okay, it's only been 10 minutes. And now I only check it a couple times a week. Every time I check it though, it's whoa, 400 more people or whatever. It's a lot more shocking now, and we've got more episodes and everything as well. So
Well, and we keep getting blocked on YouTube.
The funny thing is the last episode did not get blocked because the thing that the two episodes that got blocked so far were, was it two? No, three. The In Rock special edition bonus stuff. The regular one was fine.
Mm-hmm.
The Fireball special features or special edition, 25th anniversary edition, and then Machine Head. No, wait, Machine Head didn't get blocked. So it's just been three. So the last one is Who Do We Think We Are? I did all the special bonus tracks for that. Nothing. No problems. I don't know what it is about those albums. I don't know if it's just some weird thing with the algorithm. Who knows? Because it's not like it's a human being going through listening to all this stuff. So I have no idea why some things are getting blocked and some things aren't. But YouTube is pretty fickle from everyone that's like a YouTube. Now that I'm like a quasi YouTuber and at an extremely low level, I can see what YouTubers are complaining about all the time. It's a little frustrating, but luckily YouTube, I really only throw those things up on YouTube just to get it up there in case some people like to look at stuff through YouTube. But our main medium really is just the podcast feed. So, and the podcast feed sound quality is 10 times better too. What you're hearing through YouTube is just the raw audio as we're recording it, and it's not mixed the same way, the levels, and I've got all this noise gates from when we talk. It brings the music levels down. You get none of that on YouTube, but some people still seem to enjoy it on YouTube, so we'll keep putting it up there as long as we can before they kick us off permanently. But like we've said before, people just upload full albums with nothing, and it's no problem. And then here we are trying to offer some commentary and perspective, and we get booted off.
And we got the X.
Exactly. The big ban hammer comes down on us.
Yeah.
All right. So today we are talking once again about the history of musicians before they joined the band. And today's musicians are obviously Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, coming into Deep Purple as we begin the warm-up for the Mark III lineup of Deep Purple.
Oh, baby. I got to admit, couldn't wait for this.
Oh, I'm so excited. Like Mark III and Mark IV have always, for us, been our favorite stuff from the band, which if you've been listening, you've probably been hearing us blather on about for 15 episodes so far.
For sure.
But it's great stuff. And I always really like this era of the band because they start breaking up the formula a little bit and trying new things, and eventually that's what's going to drive Richie out because he seemed to have a very specific thing he wanted to do, and most of it was just about the control he had over the band, and he starts to lose a little bit of that as new people come in with, we bring in Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, who are not only great contributors to the band, but great musicians and songwriters in their own regard. So they tend to have some ideas as well. And John Lord and Ian Page. Damn funky. Richie Blackmore's damn funky. So we start with Glenn Hughes. He grew up as an only child, and I was reading his autobiography lately, and talks about just having a really good upbringing in childhood, and the reason bring that up is because spoilers, he has a really rough 20-year run with drugs, starting directly after he joins Deep Purple. So, talks about just how happy he was growing up and everything. He didn't come from a troubled home or anything like that. His first instrument was a trombone. He played the trombone a little bit, and he wasn't very interested in it. Then his parents got him a cheap guitar, and he said he was hooked ever since when he started the string instrument. So,
oh, thank God he wasn't interested in the trombone. We wouldn't have gotten Glenn Hughes.
It would have been great if he still joined Deep Purple, but on trombone. It'd be a little harder to sing and play at the same time.
A funky trombone.
The funky trombone.
Well, who knows? Maybe that's why maybe it's such a great lung capacity.
There you go. Yeah, it could be. It was always interesting to me because I started playing the trumpet. That was the first instrument I played when I was like in fourth or fifth grade or something. And again, I was like I played it. I was in the marching band, and I just kind of lost a little interest. And then a few years later, I would get into playing the stringed instruments. But Flea is also a trumpet player and a bass player, and then you got Glenn Hughes, who's a trombone player and a bass player. So must be something about the brass instruments that pushes you away and drives you to playing a stringed instrument. Although Flea still plays trumpet, and he's actually really incredible. I did not keep up with it. So he talks about, Glenn Hughes in his book about he saw the Beatles on TV and saw the girls screaming. He said he was only 12 years old, but he knew that that's what he wanted. He wanted to be in a band and have the girls screaming.
Don't they all?
Exactly. Coverdale in particular. He wasn't as into Elvis, he said. He was more into like doo-wop and soul music, which is not surprising if you know anything about Glenn Hughes. And Glenn's book is very interesting. You can tell it's probably like, if you're interested in reading it, just look it up on, I'll put a link in the show notes, but look it up on Amazon. It's just Glenn Hughes' autobiography. You can tell it's mostly just him probably sitting down and dictating to a writer, and with Joel McIver, I think is the guy who kind of put it together, because it's very conversational. It kind of bounces back and forth. It's just like him telling stories, and you can tell the way it's written. It's just very conversational. And then it's broken up with like interview snippets. So there'll be things from Sheila Hughes, his mother, David Coverdale, I think like different roadies from the band and things like that. So there's all these like little snippets, like Glenn Hughes will be talking about something, and then there'll be a quote from David Coverdale saying, what he thought about that or whatever. Glenn's mother talks in the book about how the girls were very interested in Glenn Hughes. He's a good looking guy. So he kind of had a lot of girls showing up to the house to see Glenn. The first band he was in was called the Hooker Lees, named after John Lee Hooker, in 1965. And then they changed their name to the Intruders. And then he had a new band called The News, pre-Huey Lewis, I guess. Probably not the same band. I didn't look it up, but I'm going to guess it's not the same band. He played lead guitar and vocals in that band. And then after that, in 1968, he joined a band called Finders Keepers with Mel Galley. And Mel Galley said he could join as long as he would play the bass. And Glenn Hughes said he would have played the tuba if they let him join the band. So he joins, he agrees to play the bass, and that's kind of what starts off on his interest in the bass. So Mel Galley was kind of like a brother to him, a mentor. He really helped him out a lot in these early days. And there's some good information I'll put in the show notes about this band, because it was one of those bands that was around for a very short time. It had about 16 people in and out of the band. But I do have a little clip here of them live playing a song called Friday Kind of Monday. I'm sorry, this is not them live. This is a recording, a single called Friday Kind of Monday. And it's a very... Can you hear that?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, here we go. So this isn't Glenn Hughes singing, but I think he does do some background singing on this. Very 60s. Very much reminds me of a lot of the stuff we were listening to on one of our first episodes where we talked about the early 60s influence, and one of these, another 2-minute song single.
Yeah, nothing really stands out about it.
I'm always trying to listen for Glenn Hughes there, see if I can pick him out, but there's so many vocalists going on. It's like funny because it's like there was like an unlimited number of bands, it seems, around that time doing this kind of stuff that's all very like, without being condescending, kind of generic sounding 60s stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. I mean, it's like you didn't, you're like trying to listen for Glenn Hughes in the background, but unless you're like, Friday, come, wouldn't be doing that in the background of this. They'd be like, hey, knock it off. Sound generic.
Exactly. It's too different.
But yeah, it's like, I feel like, and this was like, I saw that the date on that was like, what, 67?
Yeah, I think it says 67 on that picture, but I'm showing 68. This is the only recording that I can sort of with confidence say Glenn Hughes was on that I could find.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% on that. Somebody, if you're listening and you think I'm a fool, please write in and let me know where I'm wrong.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's I think a lot of the reasons that they didn't go anywhere with bands like that, we had Glenn Hughes or any of the other guys, was because, like you said, it was pretty cookie cutter type of stuff. It wasn't very distinguishable. And I mean, think about two other bands that were really stood out at the time, like Cream.
Yeah.
Is the only one that I can really think of right now, aside from the obvious, like the Beatles and
Yeah.
other bands like that really like stood out. And then you had all that other stuff, which was kind of like white noise around that time. Didn't really.
Everyone was trying to just latch onto this formula, and make songs like that. There wasn't, and a lot of it was people doing covers too. Like that's not a song that they wrote.
Yeah. And it's really no different than what happens now too. If there's or any time really, even today, I don't know much about what's going on today, but I'm sure that whatever the formula is, I'm sure that there's a lot of copycat stuff out there that is kind of the same thing. It's like a lot of it nobody cares about because it's all fitting whatever the formula is that everybody's latching onto right now.
Well, there's so much like, I feel like everyone always says, "Oh, music today is not like what it used to be." Like, and everyone's always saying that, which is a bunch of baloney. Like people say that now, like, "Oh, they just don't make good music anymore." And you even hear like people in their, like people 15, 20 years younger than you being like, "Oh, it was back in the day," meaning like, I don't know, 2011. Oh, that's when music was really good. And now it's like, it's just, there's always like like you said, a bunch of white noise in the mix, and then there's some standout stuff. We're not doing a podcast about all of the other bands that we've never heard of that were just generic and fell by the wayside. We're doing a podcast about a band that endured and did something different. So
exactly. And yeah.
So this band broke up in 1969. Mel Galley, Glenn Hughes, and Dave Holland from the band went on to form Trapeze. The original lineup of Trapeze included those three, and also John Jones on vocals, and Terry Rowley did guitar and keyboards. And that was the lineup through their first album. And then the more traditional, at least in my view, Trapeze is the
trio. Yeah.
Of Mel Galley, Dave Holland, and Glenn Hughes.
Which they had a couple of monster albums.
Yeah, and I just I listened to the three first Trapeze albums, even the first one. I listened to them nonstop when I started getting into Deep Purple, and I've listened to them little bits and pieces here and there as preparing for the show, and I'm like, wow, I can't wait to start talking about these albums because they're just so good.
Well, I remember the first Trapeze album was a little kind of hippy dippy,
like, because it was 1969, I think.
Yeah, so
it might have been 70, but it was probably recorded in 69.
But it wasn't that power pop type of thing or funky power pop type thing that they were doing in the next couple of albums. It sounded really kind of psychedelic-ish, and right. I haven't heard it for a while, but I remember that album was kind of the black sheep album in my opinion, and then the other ones were like the really good ones.
Yeah, I think it still holds up pretty well, but yeah, it was the kind of that transition. They hadn't really found their sound yet. It's like the first three Deep Purple albums all rolled into one, but
yeah,
probably better. I'd probably rather listen to the first Trapeze album. But yeah, they got together in 69. I've got the earliest footage I can find is this Glenn Hughes, I think, was 17.
Wow.
And maybe even 16, because when he's born, 51. Yeah, he would have been, well, he could have been 16, maybe not turned 17 yet, depending on when in the year this was. But this is them live on TV, and this is a really interesting video that shows you kind of what they were all about in the very, very early days.
And right now on stage, the Trapeze once again. This time they're going to play for us. Feet on the ledge.
Glenn Hughes.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Very good. Used to say.
Oh, there he is.
Club Lafayette. That's funny because the town I grew up in had a club. You know Club Lafayette, right?
Oh, no.
No.
I just think it's funny that. Who's that guy?
That, I believe, is John Jones, who was like the vocalist. who actually sounds a bit like Glenn Hughes, I think. And this song's called Meet on the Ledge. I had to Google like a madman I couldn't figure out what they were saying exactly. There he goes. He's just like 16 years old and he's already got it. Like, he's a little more lucid here, though. You can see he hasn't removed his shirt yet or anything. But yeah, still just got that great voice already at 16 years old, potentially 17. This was at the Club Lafayette in Wolverhampton, UK on Saturday, July 5th, 1969.
Wow.
So if I wasn't so lazy, I could look up his birthday and figure out exactly how old he was. Yeah, the song's called Meet on the Ledge. Again, I had to Google it crazy to find it, just taking random snippets of lyrics. It's apparently a British folk song. It's not very super well represented on that I can find, but
Glenn Hughes was born August 1952.
52, yeah, so he would have been turning 17 in a month. So yeah, he was 16. Oh.
And we're getting pissed at all these like young YouTubers that are like kicking ass, and we get pissed at like retroactively pissed at young Glenn Hughes for being that good too.
Just listen to how soulful his voice was. It's just so here they are playing a second track. This one is Open My Eyes, the name of the song. Look at this guy. I thought you were going to like this guy.
Oh, he's into it.
He's 60s. So this is early trapeze. This is before they even did their first album, and it's like, these guys are pretty damn good. And this is like we were talking about, this isn't that standard formula. This is like some interesting stuff that they're doing.
Yeah. That guy's not into it.
A few people in the audience are like, is this almost over? I don't know who that guy is. The camera work leaves a little to be desired. I always love when you see like the concert like this. It's like there's a singer on stage and you're like focusing on some guy with a handlebar mustache in the crowd. And even when they're filming Glenn Hughes, it's like from behind. It's like,
or it's blurry, or it's like, come on, get with it. There we go.
Doing a little dance in there. Guy throwing. What are those?
Frisbees, plates, records.
Yeah. Look at how young Glenn Hughes is. Maybe if they had that camera angle, they should have used it a little more. But it looks like the stage is about 6 inches above the floor where the people are watching it. So
yeah,
you're mostly seeing the backs of people's heads.
Well, the Club Lafayette was probably like looks like it's the equivalent of like a VFW over here or something.
Yeah, yeah. It looks smaller than the Club Lafayette that was in my hometown, which is where I would go see my friends' bands when they were 16 years old. But they weren't quite at this level. Well, they were pretty damn good though. So that's trapeze, very early trapeze. And again, this is the
wow.
That's the band, like probably the earliest recording of trapeze, at least that I could find. And they were on a BBC Two show, which I'm not sure if that's the one, called Color Me Pop. That might have been it. In the morning after it aired, they were contacted by George Martin, the producer of the Beatles, to join the Beatles' Apple label. but the band opted not to join Apple because they thought that the direction that George Martin had in mind would have taken them like into like more of a pop area or somewhere there they didn't really want to take the music. So they just pretty amazing, 16 years old, to be like, no thank you, George Martin of the Beatles, we're gonna we're gonna try something else. Like, God, if George Martin called me when he's dead now, but if he called me and he's dead, he was like, I'd wherever he wants me to go, I'm going. So they had their first album, Trapeze, was released, and they played it track by track on BBC Radio 1, which they said they'd only previously done for Beatles albums when they were released. So it was a little unusual to play an entire album in its entirety. So that's pretty impressive. So after they kind of broke up, or not broke up, but after they became a three-piece, they got a little bit more popular. But here's a little quick play of some early Trapeze. This is the song called Suicide, and it's off of the first album. It's actually written by Jones and Galley, not written by Hughes, but this is one of their early songs. Again, written by Jones and Galley, Terry Jones, and John Jones and Mel Galley.
Is it on? I can't hear it.
It is. It's very quiet at the beginning.
Oh.
It's one of those unnecessarily long intros. This is kind of why I picked it. It's got a really good groove to it. I always liked this one. I don't know why. Almost reminds me of the Rolling Stones. I don't know why. I almost forgot about the album cover too. It's very
60s.
Reminiscent of the Deep Purple album. It's just kind of like some public domain art in black and white.
Yeah, like a black and white. Yeah, old art.
You can hear Glenn Hughes very strongly in the background vocals here.
It's not him on lead?
Nah, that's got to be Jones.
That other guy? Yeah, see, that's why I don't really like this early stuff as much, is because it's like there's like 10 people singing. It's like, I like one vocalist. There's too much of this like 2 or 3 people in a chorus type thing. It doesn't really grab me that much.
I like the I like the trading off of vocals. I think that's kind of what I like the most about Mark III and Mark IV.
Oh no, I like that too.
You just don't like the big chorus vocals.
Yeah, like the chorus. Yeah, I like people trading off vocals. I just like. See, like I like this part of the song better.
Yeah.
Or even in the clip that we saw of them earlier, it was just a lot of like people all singing at the same time.
Yeah, yep.
Type of thing. I don't know. It's because, you know why? I feel like in these early types of songs, or like the record that you put on earlier, was like there's no defined lead vocalist.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like episode 6. There was like 6 people and 6 people who were doing lead vocals at various times.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, so the lead singer is everybody. Okay.
I like the organ though on the, if you can even call it the chorus. It's very like John Lord sounding.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not going to go into it now. So.
I mean, I agree with you. I like the groove.
It's got a good, but I like kind of like the very mellow part where they're all singing together. That kind of does it for me. So anyway, that's Suicide by Trapeze, by the first lineup.
Almost makes me think a little bit of Grand Funk because it's so bass heavy. You ever heard Grand Funk? Yep. Early albums, I mean, they were really bass heavy groove type of band, and that's one of the reasons I like them a lot. But that's because they only had one they had one singer.
Yeah.
Like you didn't like track a lot of his vocals, at least in the beginning. He didn't have a lot of like choruses and stuff like that with like
didn't they switch off vocals a bit though? Like
well they did
but only one lead singer at a time, you mean?
Yeah, they did switch off because as the guitar player and the drummer would sing, and sometimes would sing together, but it was very live sounding.
Was it Mark Farnham? Was that
Mark Farner and Don Brewer?
Don Brewer, yep.
Yeah, who's still in the band, Don Brewer. And,
I remember I used to listen to E Pluribus Funk quite a bit.
Mostly
because it's just one of the greatest album titles of all time.
Yeah.
It's a great album cover, it's a great album title, and it's a great album.
It is a great album. It's like yeah, so I mean that's one of the reasons that I like them so much is they had a real live sound, which is if music like this, like even when they were like more mellow, if albums like this, in my opinion, had less you know what, it sounds like when you have a chorus with like a bunch of people singing, it sounds very meandering to me. Like it doesn't grab me. There's no hook. So that's probably why I don't like a lot of 60s stuff. Because
maybe it speaks to you more if they're singing as backup with somebody singing over it, right? But like it's kind of it's a lot. It's impressive because the harmonies are also good, but it can kind of get lost. So that's their first album. Just simply called Trapeze. They shortly after that, John Jones and Terry Rowley left the band, and again they become the traditional three-piece lineup. Glenn Hughes talks a bit in his book about at this point, excuse me, that he was starting to see drugs around, quite a bit, but that he stayed away from it. He said they kind of scared him, the drugs, and he said at this point he didn't even like taking Tylenol. He's just like, no, like I see it, I don't really want to get interested. And if only he had kept that attitude, it probably would have been a lot better for him. But we talked before the show about how prolific Tommy Bolin was before he passed, and to think of how much he did while he was messed up on heroin and opium and all this crazy stuff. And the same thing for Glenn Hughes. What an amazing output for somebody who could barely get it together in his daily life. He was hanging by a thread for 20 years, never stopped putting out music. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Luckily at this point he was not. There's also a story in the book about Trapeze being on stage one night playing the song Medusa, which was written by Glenn Hughes, and John Bonham was he was backstage and he was really interested in it. So he just went and he took the drumsticks out of Dave Holland's hand and he just started playing the drums and played on stage with them for they said he wouldn't stop. It was like 15-minute long version of the song. It'd be awesome if there was a recording of that somewhere. But I guess he really liked the song. It really spoke to him. So this is the song off of their second album, which is also entitled Medusa. This is Medusa.
Oh, that's a damn good song.
Can maybe see what John Bonham was into here. It's amazing how quickly they matured as a band too. It's unreal. You're bound to think that I'm on the shore. To me, I like everyone talks about the big three, but I almost think Trapeze needs a little more love for just kind of formulating a style of metal almost.
Well, yeah, because I mean
you're not hearing it now, but when the band kicks in.
Well, this is the same type of formula that like Ronnie James Dio, Black Sabbath did. They hook you in with that really slow beginning, and then boom, they hit you with the heavy.
With just an incredible riff, This definitely very different formula from what we've been listening to lately with Deep Purple.
Yeah.
So at this point, Glenn Hughes would have been, 18? Here he is, the lead singer of this incredible three-piece band. That's like a Tony Iommi riff right there.
Oh, yeah. Well, is it any wonder that he wound up working with Iommi like many times over the following years?
Right. It's just such a strong song and such a strong album. I always feel like I liked this album a little bit more than You're the Music, We're Just the Band.
Oh,
Although I like that album too, but there's something about the rawness of this album.
Yeah, this is very raw.
You can hear them bringing in all of these what would become kind of almost cliche elements of early metal, and it wasn't at that point. Like this was getting developed. This is the contemporary album to this is the Black Sabbath album and In Rock, and this is coming out at the same time.
69, 70, this album?
This came out in 70.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's really produced really well too. It's really crisp.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's something you would have heard in the late 70s.
Oh yeah, I mean, everything is just really crisp. Like all the instruments are defined. His vocals are like out front.
It's like really raw on the vocals too. Like no effects on the vocals, just everything. It's like that style you'd expect to hear more in the mid to later 70s, of that dry drum sound. Really, you just hit the snare and it's just like pop, not the reverb that goes on for 16 seconds like on the 80s sort of sounding recordings. But no effects, no synthesizers, just this would have been exactly what they sounded like live. They probably recorded it live.
Yeah.
But it gives you a sense of where Glenn Hughes is coming from as a songwriter, and he wrote the song. He's the only one credited on the song. So the arrangement too, he's going back to this part. You've got this great riff. That means Glenn Hughes wrote that. He wrote that like metal riff. It's great. But you can see now why Deep Purple would have taken an interest in him as a songwriter, as a singer, and most importantly as a bass player. They really speak highly of his skills on the bass, but I feel like that always gets cast aside because of how big a personality he was and how big of a voice he has. People don't talk as much about how great a bass player he was.
Hey, we always did.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
so I'm gonna cut it there. That's Medusa.
Yeah, I mean, it almost, when you hear his stuff with Trapeze, it's almost like you wonder. It almost pales in comparison to what he did in Deep Purple. I mean, I would say, like, when I hear this stuff, I think it's because like he was one of three guys, and then he walks into an established situation, and then he's one of like five guys.
Yeah.
So maybe it was diluted a little bit, but it a lot of times when I heard his Trapeze stuff and then the Deep Purple stuff, not to take away from the Deep Purple stuff, of course, but I kind of enjoy the Trapeze stuff a little bit more with for him.
And it will come up again and again, but he was meant to be a lead singer, like to have him. Even though he was, Mark III and Mark IV essentially had two lead singers, like they, but he wasn't the only guy.
Yeah, I mean, if they never hired Coverdale, which let's not even talk about a universe where there's no Coverdale, like they would have been fine with him on bass and vocals.
Oh God, yeah, and they talk about that in a lot of the books I'm reading too about this, but particularly when Coverdale, ends up leaving the band, and and was it 76, talking about, do we press on with Hughes? And honestly, if Hughes hadn't been so messed up on drugs, they probably would have.
Well, I mean, it was John Lord and Ian Pace were the only ones. Like if Coverdale left, then those were the only two guys that weren't screwed up all the time. So if you think about it, so that's when they decided to end it.
Exactly.
Because I mean, you've seen the interviews with I'm sure with John Lord and everything, talking about this beautiful thing that we started. I just couldn't stand to see it in the state that it was in anymore. So there was like one night when they just walked off stage, and he turned to Ian Pace and was like, "That's it. We gotta pull the plug." Or it's a paraphrasing, of course, but the famous story.
Yep.
Of that's how the first incarnation ended until '84.
Right. Right. And I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about them continuing on without Coverdale, because Coverdale wouldn't have left either. You know, like there was, and John Lord also talks about like, wow, like he says we would have had another album in us at least with that lineup, and we could have done. He says he's very happy with Come Taste the Band, but imagine what they could have put forward had Bolan and Hughes had it together. You know, it's but pretty amazing stuff. So after that, we come to the last album or recording that Glenn Hughes would have before joining Deep Purple, and that is picked the song Coast to Coast off of the album You're the Music, We're Just the Band.
Oh, that's another good one.
Is a classic Hughes song, which really showcases his vocals.
Yeah, well, this is just a great song, too. Like, I just love when Glenn Hughes writes this type of song or sings this type of song.
He's so good at it.
Yeah. This is probably one of my favorite ballads of all time.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, but like every time I hear this song, it just reminds me of why I love it so much. I mean, listen to him. It's like his voice is flawless.
It's always flawless. Even when he's getting crazy and hitting those like high-pitched notes that are just like too high. he's an incredibly gifted singer, and he would have been the ripe old age of 20 when this came out.
And then I think like when he did that 80s album with what's his name? That guitar player Hughes Thrall, Pat Thrall.
Yep.
And they redid this song like 80s style, and it was nowhere near as good.
It's always hard to do that. The only time that's really been successful is when Whitesnake redid Here We Go Again. Or Here I Go Again.
That's true. But that wasn't even that many years later.
Yeah, I know. It was, what, like 3 years later or something?
Yeah, something like that.
I always thought it was weird that they did that. I mean, obviously it worked out very well for them. But, well, yeah, that's generally... It's hard to... There's always that kind of thought of, like, let's try to recapture the magic or redo the formula like we talked about with Who Do We Think We Are? Let's do the same formula we did for Machine Head. It very rarely works out that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's Coast to Coast, you know, and I feel like we'll get a little bit more into these probably as we get into our reviews eventually of the albums by Trapeze, because I mean, Trapeze is so good. They've changed the way I say trapeze. Like growing up, you'd say trapeze, but now it's like TR''P's, you know. And ever since I got into trapeze, I kind of say trapeze, but if it's like at the circus, I'm like, oh, that's a trapeze, you know. But yeah, really amazing stuff. Always love that band, and they do a lot of stuff even after this. They kind of try to get together again after Hughes leaves Purple, and with worse results because of Hughes's unfortunate cocaine habit. So as this song plays out, still some like little background in how they got Hughes into the band. So Richie said he wanted to get a new bass player and singer to do more melodic content. Gillan, as we know, had given his 9 months notice, and the band and management basically didn't do anything until Ian Gillan left in June, and then they were like, oh crap, we need to get replacements.
Idiots.
Kind of shows some of the ineptitude of the management, but also I wonder if they were just like, nah, he's not gonna really leave. And then when he left, they're like, I guess we really need to do something. John Lord said that kind of the routine was getting tired of what they were doing and how they were doing music, and he was also looking for something new. And he had toyed at that point with leaving the band. He wasn't happy how the things went with Roger Glover, and, you know, he was kind of working on his Windows project, and he was like, maybe I should just leave the band, but he eventually stuck around. Richie Blackmore really wanted to get Paul Rodgers in the band. He talks about it all the time. Paul Rodgers. He wanted Paul Rodgers in the band. He wanted him in every thing he worked on, he always wanted Paul Rogers. And I don't think it ever happened. Maybe it happened somewhere down the line, but not that I'm familiar with. But Paul Rogers also had a reputation of being a bit of a control freak. He was in the band Free at that time. And then he left the band and formed Bad Company instead of going with Deep Purple. Can you imagine having like another control freak with Blackmore in the band? I'm sure that would have. So he can always think longingly of what it would have been like to work with Paul Rogers, but he probably would have hated him. I mean, is there any singer besides his wife that he's ever gotten along with?
I don't know. And they've been doing it for a while too. So
God, that's
must be really
over 20 years. I mean, obviously that's his fourth marriage.
Whoa.
And his who knows 12th lead singer at least.
So, I mean, either she calmed him down, or she must be really submissive. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe she's just like, whatever, Richie. I'll sing with her. I mean, she seems like, I gotta say, all my interviews I've seen with her, she seems like just like the nicest, like most happy-go-lucky kind of person you could possibly imagine. And there's actually a really great interview on YouTube, which you should look up. It's like him and her doing an interview together, and you just see Richie being Richie, and she's just like the last person on earth you'd ever expect would be married to Richie Blackmore, because she's so like bubbly and happy and upbeat and like positive, and he's just being kind of like, really sarcastic and that dry sense of humor. But yeah, it's really funny, and I think, I mean, she was obviously very good for him, both in their personal relationship and in their musical relationship, because he's worked with some of the greatest vocalists in rock history and managed to have fights with all of them. So anyway, Paul Rogers turns down the job, and Richie said, well, John is going to go off and do his thing with Tony Ashton, and I'm going to go make this rock band and take Pacey with me. He wanted to start a new band. He toyed with that thing with Phil Lynott, with Babyface. He toyed with all the stuff that he wanted to do, but he eventually was convinced to stay. Roger Glover takes over as the head of A&R at Purple Records, which is funny. He gets kicked out of the band, but he's still like a major player at Purple Records, and he starts focusing on production and does production for lots of huge bands and lots of big albums. Richie Blackmore says, I was writing 80% of the stuff, but the credit was being split 5 ways. I got tired of not getting the respect. Then I decided that we were stagnating. I told Ian, the drummer, that I wasn't happy with the way things were going. I didn't want any trouble within the group. So let me leave, and let's come with me and we'll do our own band. But Ian convinces him to stay. So Glenn Hughes, it's 1972. They're playing a few nights at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and Richie, John, and Ian Pace all join the audience, go to the audience, but all separately on all the different nights, and they go to see the band. And Glenn Hughes is on stage, and he's like, oh wow, they must be big fans of Trapeze. I didn't know. But they were really there to scout him out, obviously. They asked him to join, and he said, no, I'm not really interested, but then pretty quickly changed his mind. Richie invites Glenn to his house in South London. They jam on our track that will eventually turn into Mistreated, and talk about kind of Richie's vision for where he wants the band to go. Glenn joined under the assumption that he'd be replacing both Roger Glover and Ian Gillan and moving forward as a 4-piece. But then they, obviously go off and hire Coverdale, and Glenn Hughes seems pretty good with that. And him and Coverdale have always had a really good relationship. So there was not a lot of animosity there. He was just kind of surprised. He thought they were more interested in him as a singer but Blackmore seems like he was more interested in him as a bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn Hughes talks about when he first joins Deep Purple. This is right after they released, Who Do We Think We Are, Made in Japan. He says he's getting like all these plaques and gold records and like a watch that he's like, this is Roger Glover's watch. I shouldn't have this, like all of these accolades and things for stuff that the band had done. And even Roger Glover talks about it in one of his interviews, where they say, like, because Deep Purple was the #1 selling band that year, and they put up a picture of the Mark III lineup over it, and Roger Glover's really pissed off because he's like, they haven't even recorded or played with them yet. But obviously those guys all really, I think they all handled it really well, and they all played on each other's stuff and were still good friends.
Yeah.
Hughes claims that Coverdale was the only one auditioned as a vocalist, but John Coletta, their manager, says that multiple other people auditioned, although I can't find any proof of that anywhere. Coletta says that people when they were coming into audition, they didn't know who they were auditioning for. They just came in and they're like, oh crap, this is Deep Purple. And then Sheila Hughes says in Hughes's biography that ELO was also interested in Deep Purple, and he almost joined ELO, but he ended up turning them down and joins Deep Purple instead. So now they've got
he who
I'm
he
sorry,
who Glenn Hughes.
He he.
Oh, okay.
I'm
like he who
he. So Glenn Hughes's mom says ELO courted him, and he was like agonizing, do I join ELO or do I join Deep Purple? But in the book Smoke on the Water, they said he had kind of already turned ELO down a while before that, so I don't know how it actually went down. And Glenn Hughes doesn't talk about it in his book, just his mom does, oddly. So that brings us to the next man, David Coverdale. Now this is
our favorite
Twitter user, favorite horny lead singer, just all around awesome. And he's contending he's contending with a lot of horny lead singers too, let me be perfectly clear.
But I'm excited about this. I don't know anything about Coverdale before Deep Purple, so lay it on me.
Well, it's a huge, long story, and it's actually really, it's mind-boggling how he ended up in Deep Purple. Like, to this day, I think even in interviews now, he's just like, I don't know how I ended up in Deep Purple, but he's still very thankful to the band and for everything, because it obviously put him on the map, and he's had no struggles since then. But he also grew up, just like Hughes, as an only child. He started performing professionally at 14, and he was in all of these kinds of bands, but you know, the little local bands. A band called the Skyliners, a band called Vintage 67, a band called Magdalene, Denver Mule, The Government. And The Government is kind of like one of the later bands that he was in. I've got an image here that I found from, let's see, where is it? So this is something David Coverdale had tweeted a while ago that I found, and it is a picture of, he says, Denver Mule, a local band I opened this festival way back in the day, and he puts a little smiley face. So it's a little poster of this festival. It was August 31st, 1968. A lot of bands of the Family, which I don't know if that's the same as Family, Joe Cocker's Grease Band, all of these bands, Traffic, and I guess his band opened up for them at this festival. And then there's
look at all these people. Look at all those bands on there. There's Traffic and Steve Winwood, Benny King, the Young Boy Dukes
and Rivers Invitation, I know just from doing my research, was another name, I believe, for Denver Mule formed into The Government, and then The Government changed into Rivers Invitation, I think. I could be wrong on that, but he was in so many bands that were like, just the names were constantly changing, but Rivers Invitation would have been his band.
Cool.
And then here's a picture of them. You can see him in the middle there, kind of crouched over. You know, they're just playing a show on the grass. There's no stage. This is Denver Mule, 1968. Alan Todd on guitar, John Collins on drums, Mick Martin on guitar, and Jeff Tisbury on bass. So,
wow,
there they are playing. And it looks like, I don't know, just like kind of an abandoned lot or something. A little... Their speakers are all set down really low. David Coverdale's hunched over. Like, I don't know if he's hunched over because maybe the mic cable wasn't long enough. Like, he had to just lean over to sing into the mic. But some pretty interesting stuff. And then I have to share, the next picture is, if you haven't seen this before, you gotta get ready. That is The Government. And just look at David Coverdale. That's David Coverdale. So, for those,
I don't even know what he looks like. I don't even know what I'm laughing at.
I knew you would like this. I wasn't sure if you'd seen it or not before, but this is one that's been floating around. I remember seeing this picture like, back in the mid 90s when you'd be like looking at like the Deep Purple Appreciation Society or something. If you go way back into the archives, you'd find this photo. And it's the band of, you've got a guy on sax, a guitar player, must be the drummer because he's not holding anything, a bass player, and a trumpet player, and all respectably dressed in, suits of the day and ties and dress shoes. And then dead center is David Coverdale with this crazy hair, these dark sunglasses, this very, very sketchy little pencil mustache. Then he's got this big ascot on around his neck, and he's wearing like some sort of weird double-breasted number. And the way he's going like this, the way he's kind of like folding his arms, just almost makes it look like he's doing like trying to be like a homeboy or something. It's a very odd stance he has.
Well, he looks like he's at least like 20 pounds heavier than he was later. And it looks like, what is that? It looks like a pea coat and like a gift wrap bow around his neck.
that's actually a better.
I don't know what
than an ascot. That it does look like a gift wrapped.
Like I'm looking at him and he looks like something, but I can't put my finger on it, or like somebody, but he's David Coverdale. The sunglasses
and the mustache definitely. I mean, he looks extremely sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to see him outside the elementary school or anything,
No, he would be he would not be welcome. You'd expect him.
They would have thrown him in a paddy wagon.
You expect to see him knocking on doors to introduce himself because of his past performance. Here's another really early picture of Denver Mule in 1967 with David Coverdale.
Wait, is that him on the left?
That's him on the left. Yep.
My God, I've never seen. I'm like blown away right now. I've never seen like young pictures of Coverdale. Like, what's he, like 15 in that?
15 or 16.
Well, wait, Denver Mule, 1967. So he's like, him and Hughes got to be around the same age, right?
He's probably 15. No older than 16, I wouldn't think. I mean, look at those other two guys don't. They look pretty young too. So.
But I mean, Coverdale's like, you can tell like just by his face that's him.
Yep.
But it's at the same time, it's like you're looking at it and you're like, oh, that's got to be like Coverdale's younger brother or his cousin or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's got the big, thick glasses, and it's definitely a look. So some cool archival photos. I'll have them in the show notes. And then interestingly, there's this photo here which captures him looking kind of similar to what he would have looked like in Deep Purple, wearing that kind of almost looks like he borrowed that shirt from Richie Blackmore.
Look at the guy on the left. He literally, it doesn't even look like he has sunglasses on. He looks like a fly. Like he looks like he's got big bug eyes, and like he looks like that who's the guy that founded the Church of Satan? He was like,
like,
my God,
like a fly.
He does look at him. He's got like, if you look at it really quick, it doesn't even look like sunglasses. He looks like Jeff Goldblum in that movie. Like he's got the big fucking bug eyes and like a devil like beard and everything, and that's the most evil looking man I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, it's the same guy from it would have been the same guy from this photo, right? Which one is he here? I don't know, but he went through a real transformation, I'll tell you that. Yes, the fly is kind of a transformation. It's like it's a Kafka-esque story.
But yeah, Coverdale definitely looks more like himself as we know him when he joined Deep Purple. For sure.
He does a lot more, yes.
Yikes.
So they were, the government was previously Denver Mule, so they kind of changed the name to the government. They have a real blood, sweat, and tears sort of sound, which I like.
I could hear that.
Mostly because they're probably doing songs with horns and stuff. But Malcolm Buckton, the bass player, changed the name from the Skyliners when he saw the new government health warning as he opened a pack of cigarettes. So he said, let's name ourselves the government. Okay. And this is the group that Coverdale was in when they opened for Deep Purple, and he talked to John Lord and said, oh, hey, if things don't work out with this new Ian Gillan guy, here's my number. And, you know, it would have been 4 years later, but eventually it did happen. So here's a couple of songs. This first song is, let me pick this up. This song is called Bang Bang. And this is by The Government. And this is a cover.
Shot me down.
It's weird, you almost can't tell it's him until then. There's another good picture of him.
There's his bow tie.
Where you can hear these little kind of like flashes of Coverdale, of trademark Coverdale, but
oh, you can definitely tell it's him.
yeah, at first you can't, but when he gets into it, you...
Dave Coverdale.
Dave Coverdale, yeah. Funny calling him Dave for some reason. This part just does not sound like him.
It's my new favorite picture of Coverdale right there.
My new favorite picture ever.
Yeah, just not of Coverdale, just of anything.
Exactly, it's your favorite picture. End quote.
My baby shot me down.
So that kind of gives you the idea. That's where this band was coming from. Some pretty good, you know, not bad. I mean, this was recorded extremely amateurishly. It's not a very great quality, but you can hear some really good flashes of what Coverdale will evolve into. So he was in this band. He was in another band called Rivers Invitation, which I think was the same band. He was in a band called Fabulosa Brothers, which apparently was the band that he was in when he joined Deep Purple. But then here's another song from The Government, which a song you will undoubtedly recognize.
Baby, I ain't got no time to take a fast train. Said the lonely days are gone. I'm coming home to you, baby. Oh, my woman, she wrote me a letter.
Again, quality is not 100% there, but song we're all familiar with, and David Coverdale's got quite a bit of soul dripping into the song. So that's kind of mostly where they were at.
I mean, it's like Coverdale sounds great, but the music sounds awful. Like the instruments were just recorded terrible.
Oh yeah, I mean this is probably recorded with like a microphone in a room, you know?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you could definitely hear like Coverdale's like raw voice. Like it's not far off from the Coverdale that we all know and adore.
Nope, not too far off at all.
So
to give you an idea, there were some demos that he sent in. Maybe we'll get to those in a minute. But Blackmore says, Glenn we saw at the Marquee, and Ian and John said we must have him, but we still needed another singer, a more masculine voice. I was off to form a band with Ian Pace. I thought it would be an adventure, but Ian Pace said it would be silly to abandon all our efforts. Probably in 3 years, the band will have to reshuffle again. Maybe David and Glenn will be getting new members. Blackmore said, I could put Ian down, but I don't think I want to get into that because he's never put any of the band down. He's talking about Ian Gillan. I thought Ian Gillan was a very good vocalist, and he had a great face and image. He got a lot of people interested in Deep Purple. But then his vocals began to not do anything for me. I used to say, I think that vocal is a load of shit. And this is why Ian and I fell out. I wasn't quite satisfied. The band was always a bit poppy. It was quite nice, but it was too poppy. They went through a bunch of demo tapes, including a lot of like Gillan impersonators. People, wanted to be the next Ian Gillan, but that's not the direction they wanted. They said there was even a 15-year-old with no experience who sent in, which is not too far off from Coverdale, but sent in a tape, and who they ended up getting was not too much farther off from a 15-year-old with no experience. It was a 20-year-old with a little experience. They said they were really struggling to fill this vocalist spot. They considered being a 4-piece, but Coverdale had supported Deep Purple, and on November 22nd, 1969 at Bradford University, like I said, he gave Lord his number. And in 1973, he was an unknown 21-year-old, and he ends up sending in this demo, as we'll see in a little bit. He was working at a store called Stride and Style in Redcar, which was a clothing store. Coverdale, he read the Melody Maker advertisement saying they were looking for a band, and he was like, during his lunch break, and he said, maybe I'll audition. He knew this local promoter named Roger Barker, of the promoter of the Redcar Jazz Club where Deep Purple had played, and he is who ended up helping David Coverdale get the tape into the right hands. Coverdale didn't have any pictures. He didn't have like a picture to send in, which they needed with the audition. So the only picture he had was a picture of him in his Boy Scout uniform from his mom. So he sent that in. So we're already seeing the kind of, how did this happen? Like, how did this kind of goofy, weird looking, unknown guy who did a lot of things wrong possibly get the job as like one of the biggest bands in the world? His band demo that he sent in was from the Fabulosa Brothers, and they recorded at Strawberry Studios in Stockport. And Ian Pace in the book Smoke on the Water says, Ian Pace is very direct. David's tape was rubbish, except for 4 bars where he actually sung really hard, and I thought there was something in his voice that was really good. So I said, let's get him down here. He had these incredibly awful glasses on and this strange, not quite straight hair, and he had an eye that wandered around. Nervous thing, and he was massively overweight, but we got him in the studio and he sang very well. But part of the deal was, if you're going to come into the band, you've got to look different to that, because he looked exactly what he was, a chap from a clothing store who really didn't give a toss about himself. He agreed to everything because he wanted in, and became the glorious David Coverdale that everybody knows and loves today.
Wow. See, so I wasn't off, though. He was overweight.
Yeah, he was. He was. I mean, he says massively overweight. I think that's it's a little bit of an exaggeration. I mean, he looked 20 pounds heavier than normal Coverdale, but.
Well, I mean, if you look at, like, I don't know, say, like, if they were used to, like, Ian Gillan, and then you see a guy that's, like, 20 pounds heavier than Ian Gillan, that would be probably massive to them.
Yeah, and I guess for, like, looking for the right look, which seemed to be very important to them. So here's a clip of one of the songs on this demo that he sent in that Ian Pace said was rubbish. Again, not the greatest audio quality. In that picture, you can definitely tell he's got more weight on him. Yeah, just listen to that voice. He had it. Just like the early stuff we listened to by Glenn Hughes. I mean, he had it from the get-go.
Yeah.
And this is without the aid of any sort of studio trickery. This is... the first time he was really spent any time in the studio was recording Burn. So that gives you kind of an idea. Like, again, there's not much going on in the song, but when you're listening to his singing,
yeah,
you really, really hear it. So they said they gave him some contact lenses and diet pills, which was just speed. Rob Cooksey, their road manager, said he was wired out all the time when they made Burn. But he weathered the problem really well because he had a strong personality. So he's kind of just all wired up, trying to lose weight, which he seems to have kept off for 50 years almost.
yeah.
Like,
Well,
I don't remember him ever kind of putting any weight back on.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's either diet pills. You either live to the ripe old age like David Coverdale, or you become addicted and like go down in flames like freaking Judy Garland or whatever.
Right. It's so weird. It's so weird, the different takes on it. Like, I mean, growing up, like in the era that we grew up in, we were kind of the philosophy with kids was just scare them straight into not doing drugs. So they'd be like, if you even look at cocaine, you'll become instantly addicted and die within 3 hours. And I'm like, oh, so that's kind of what I always, that's why I've never touched the stuff. I was just like, well, I was terrified of it. And, now I'm terrified of it for different reasons, but like I feel like we were scared by that stuff. Like, maybe not people not being 100% honest, but in reading the book, it seems like David Coverdale, like from what Glenn Hughes says, like, yeah, we'd be, on the weekend, David Coverdale would, he would do a line of coke, and then he'd be like, all right, boys, see you later. And, Glenn Hughes would be up for, 10 days straight doing coke, like every 2 hours, like, so it really has a lot to do with whatever receptors in your brain that triggers. Cause some people could just do it here and there and it's not a problem. And some people it ruins their life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and here I am about halfway through Glenn Hughes' autobiography, and I'm like, yep, I don't know if I'm one of the people that would be addicted to it or ruin my life or not, but it sounds awful. Like all the stuff he's like being up for 10 days and all the stuff is just like, oh my God, it sounds just terrible. So anyway, they call David Coverdale in the studio to audition for them. Coverdale says he arrived with some Dutch courage, which means Bell's whiskey. And then he talks about where he met John and Ian. He says, Pacey and Lordy were already at the studio when I arrived. Mr. Lord was exceptionally charming and welcoming, doing his best to put me at ease, whilst Ian was messed around on his Ludwig drum kit. Richie arrived next with his wife Babs and their 2 wolfhounds whom Richie obviously doted on. He completely ignored me other than a quick surreptitious look to check me out, a brief nod when we made eye contact. Without missing a beat, I was off to the whiskey for a quick, nervous sip. Make that gulp. Imagine Coverdale singing that.
Yeah.
He said he felt self-conscious about his look, so he borrowed clothes from the store that he worked at to go for the audition. And then he said when Glenn Hughes arrived, like he felt a little more at ease. Like Glenn Hughes, there's a story like he came in and he walked into the doorway or something and like and everybody laughed, and he said he felt a little bit better. So they jammed with Coverdale improvising. Coverdale said that he'd learned Strange Kind of Woman, and they played like a kind of a slower, bluesier version of that. Would love to hear that. And Blackmore said, okay, you can sing rock. Let's see what you can do with a ballad. Anything you want to see? And Coverdale suggested singing Yesterday by the Beatles, and he claims that that's what got him the gig. So Coverdale met with John Coletta, who Coverdale says interrogated him about if he ever had any criminal convictions or an unsavory past that could embarrass the band. I mean, what kind of past could embarrass like a 70s rock band, like the debauchery they're getting up to?
Oh my God, I know, right?
Have you ever killed anyone? That's probably the only thing, really. You've got all these famous rock stars who did horrible things, who should probably be in prison, but so he passed the test. John gave him he gave him £50 to get some new clothes and a haircut and not embarrass the band, I guess. And then Ian Pace says he drove Coverdale to the train station, and Coverdale used the money to buy himself a first-class ticket on the train. And then he didn't hear anything back from them for like a week before he got the call to come back to London that he got the gig.
Wow.
So pretty amazing story. It's, people say it's a Cinderella story, really. I mean, it's just completely crazy that they didn't go with like a well-known, although Richie kind of has a formula for doing that, doesn't he? I mean, he always kind of picks up some,
some guy,
some like new, unknown entity and makes them a world-class singer. So he said he said the management told him that he'd be getting 80 pounds a week to sign the contract, and Coverdale says, well, that's the same he was making working at the clothing store.
Oh man.
But then the band said, well, they'll take care of everything else: clothes, living expenses, equipment, all travel would be paid by the bands, and he'd be a 1/5 member of the band. So he said he'd take the contract and look it over, and then John Coletta like went absolutely crazy on him, screaming at him, and then he's like, I could get Mick Jagger in here tomorrow to be the singer of this band, and blah blah blah, just like saying all this crazy stuff. And then he said he felt intimidated. He's like, well, I don't want to blow this, like I better sign this contract. And then later he talks about telling John Lord about this like years later, and John Lord was like furious. He's like, you never should have signed that contract.
This John Coletta guy sounds like an asshole.
I
don't like him. Everything I've heard about him, I dislike.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine there were a lot of great people who were managing rock bands in the 70s. Oh, that guy is just a warm-hearted, loving person who just cares.
He's charming. Oh, what a gentleman.
So Coverdale was, so here he is. He's in the band. He gets invited to Blackmore's house to write some songs. Blackmore had made the decision to stay in Purple because he wanted the creative control. Coverdale returned home with a cassette of Blackmore's music. Blackmore gives him this music. Here's all my riffs and the songs we're working on, so that he can take it home and write lyrics. So he starts kind of writing lyrics to all the songs. Coverdale, the band met at Clearwell Castle in, I'm going to say this wrong. I'm sorry to our UK listeners. Gloucestershire? It's like one of those words. It's probably just Gloucester, but it's like Worcestershire sauce, and it's just called Worcester sauce. So maybe it's just Gloucester. I don't know.
Well, you just say it really fast. Worcestershire sauce.
I just sound drunk.
Say Gloucester. Okay. So anyway, they were there.
They were at the place that I talked about.
At that place that he just mentioned.
He's like, this is their first like real jam session. Coverdale's really nervous, and they said John Lord just started playing some Beatles songs, and so that they could just kind of break the ice, and he started singing along and felt a little better. Coverdale says that the songs they worked on were put together with input from Lord, Pace, and Hughes, but but Blackmore kind of had the final say on everything. Coverdale,
shocker. Sorry.
The only thing we didn't say is, like we said, Coverdale refused. Or no, Blackmore refused. Blackmore refused. That's like the word that most commonly comes after Blackmore. Blackmore refused. So Coverdale said he was just in complete disbelief, going from, he says, what a band, what an unbelievable, powerful collective this was. It's easy for me as a singer to stand back and watch and listen. It was incredible. I couldn't believe my luck in being involved with this enterprise. Please, if this is a dream, don't wake me up. So rightly grateful for the amazing opportunity he's been given. So the band flies to Hamburg, and they checked into the Atlantic Hotel for a long weekend off from rehearsals. At the clubs, Blackmore takes Coverdale to some of the clubs in Hamburg, and he says, watch what tempos the girls are dancing to the most, and that's what we want in our songwriting. It's a weird thing to say.
Man,
sounds like he was starting to learn about being a horn dog from the old rich man himself. So they do. Do I have a picture of it? Oh, maybe I don't. There's like a famous picture, and I might not have it right here. I'll look for it while I'm looking it up. But they go to this castle in And they
Gloucestershire sauce.
Gloucestershire sauce, and they they kind of they make an announcement to the world that, hey, this is the band now. This is Deep Purple. And here's a photo right here of the band. Oops, I can open up, and this is kind of their announcement to the world of like, here's our new lineup. And that's all them there at like the kind of balcony of the castle overlooking it. And there's David Coverdale looking a little more like the Coverdale we know.
Mm-hmm.
They've got like, everyone's got like, Ian Pace has got like a pint of beer. There's like some Johnny Walker Red Label there.
Well, look, they all got drinks. It looks like.
It looks like all of them have drinks. Yep.
And Coverdale looks like he's kind of holding a dagger. I know he's not, but.
Oh yeah, I can see that. It looks like the hilt of the. No, there's a lot of other photos from that day, and it's just a glass of like brandy or something. It's like the same glass that John Lord has there on them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it looks like Richie's drinking water.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's where they kind of announced this new lineup to the world. And the press was all invited to ask them questions, and they were all basically like, oh wow, it's great to see. Who the hell is this guy? Like nobody knows, which rightly so. And the band was very supportive of him and backed him up. Blackmore says on the new lineup, he says, you could say a Beatles feel with a hard rock backing is the basic thing. We expect a vocalist to take on the part of a lead instrument. Who knows? After the LP, we might be saying Coverdale, he's a shitty vocalist as well. I'm not to say he's the best vocalist in the world, but when we heard him, we thought, Christ, he's good. There are now 2 other guys involved, so it makes more or less a new band to me. It's not Deep Purple anymore, although it's the same name. Really, it's a completely different band, which I would kind of agree with.
I'm still glad they were Deep Purple.
Me too. I mean, it doesn't really matter in the end, but yeah, it's every time there's a lineup change, it's kind of like a new thing. And then they definitely, as we know, take it into a very different direction from what they were doing in Mark II.
I was like just thinking of when you said earlier that he learned, Coverdale learned, what was it, Strange Kind of Woman?
Yeah.
And then you said, let's play a ballad, they said,
mm-hmm.
or let's play a slower song. Wouldn't they probably never did, to my knowledge, but wouldn't it have been amazing if they tried to do a version of Child in Time with Coverdale and Hughes doing the vocals?
I think they did, and I haven't heard it, but I've seen that I think there might be recordings out there of David Coverdale singing it.
Because I feel like they would have been able, like Coverdale would have been able to handle the beginning parts, but then I feel like him and Hughes could have like harmonized like the bridge or the chorus parts or whatever.
Yep.
Or something, like, I don't know. I was thinking of it like,
right, the high parts like easily.
Yeah. But that would have been really cool, like new twist on it if they had ever done it, or I haven't heard it, but
no, that would be incredible. I have seen people talk about it, but I don't know if there's a recording out there, but we should find it. And there's probably people yelling at the podcast right now. You idiots, you say you're the Deep Purple podcast. How do you not know this?
It exists, you wankers. They might be
British. They might be British.
Actually, you know what? And here's another thing that I think of, just kind of a random thought. Is there a cover of Child in Time that anybody's done? I'd like to hear that. I think I'm going to go searching for it, because has nothing to do with this episode, but I'm just like, now I'm curious.
I am looking now. I'm seeing some different covers, but it's like mostly stuff on YouTube and not necessarily by bands that you would know, like just but by people like on YouTube. It says that Yingwei did a cover of it.
Yeah? Well, I'm not surprised. Yingwei's done like a cover of like everything Deep Purple, it seems.
Yeah, it was covered by Yngwie Malmsteen on his 1996 album Inspiration.
Oh, okay.
And then, as we all know, Ian Gillan, they say Ian Gillan did a cover of it, which I think is like not necessarily true. It's kind of his song, but on his solo album, he does it.
That's a great version on his solo album. But I mean, I'm talking about like I like it because he did it in a different, like a different style and tempo and everything. But I mean, somebody not in the band. like even like one of these little, like these YouTube sensations that we've been seeing, like a 15-year-old vocalist or something, like tackling Child in Time. That would be really interesting to see.
Well, it was covered on the the remachined cover album of Machine Head.
Yeah.
So it was covered on there by who was it? Cactus Jack. I'm not familiar with their work, but I think they're like from Europe or something. But they did a cover of it on that album, because obviously it's a cover of the entire album. So anyway, so that kind of leads us up to, again, it's kind of like the last episode we did. There was too much to cram into the who do we think we are episode, so we kind of had to do a separate episode. And we always like to do these little episodes that are little wind-ups, or to let you know, like, who are the people coming into the band, where are they from, especially for people that aren't already familiar. And here we are, almost at the 90-minute mark, so that would have been a lot to cram into what's already probably going to be a quite lengthy episode on the Burn album. So when we get to next week, we can just kind of jump right in and tackle Burn and talk about just how incredible that album is, which we toyed with doing right now, like after this episode, just recording a second episode. But yeah, it's already like 11 p.m. your time. So yeah, we'd be easily going until 1 or 2 in the morning. So we're probably going to wrap it up there, but we got to talk one real quick thing, which is this week in Deep Purple history. When this episode comes out on August 12th, the week of August 12th through the 18th, we've got a few historical milestones to talk about. We've got the Hair himself, Mr. Tommy Aldridge, was born on August 15th, 1950. So his birthday is coming up. Wow. We've got any thoughts on Tommy Aldridge before I move along?
I like him. He's one of those guys that's just, he seems to have drummed with everybody.
Yeah, he's just so prolific. It's unbelievable.
And I'm really I'm happy that I got to see him with Whitesnake recently when I did, because I mean, he was played with Ozzy, played with Whitesnake, he's played with so many different it's just kind of one of those what would you call him, not really a hired gun type, because I'm sure he's does he have his own band,
like the Tommy Aldridge band?
No, but like a band that he started in, and it was his band, kind of like Trapeze was Hughes's band and stuff like that. And then he just kind of became he was in just everything with people.
That's a good question.
Because I know him the best from Ozzy and Whitesnake. And to be honest, that's it. But I mean, I know he's been around long enough that I'm sure that he's been with a ton of other bands, but I've never.
I just always, we talked about one of the first albums I ever got was the tribute album, one of the first CDs, I should say. And I just remember Tommy Aldridge and just hearing him just go crazy on the drums, and that was my first introduction to him. And then the Whitesnake stuff. And David Coverdale posted a selfie or something on Twitter the other day of I think it was him and his wife on the private plane, and you'd see this big puff of hair in the background behind him, and it's clearly Tommy Aldridge sitting in the seat behind him.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. I'm just looking him up. First of all, happy 68th. He'll be 68.
68, very nice. Well, he'll be 69.
Oh, sorry, 69. Sorry. Let me see. He's played with numerous artists such as Black Oak, Arkansas, Pat Travers, Ozzy, Gary Moore, Whitesnake, Ted Nugent, Thin Lizzy, Vinnie Moore, and Yngwie Malmsteen.
Oh, really? So, really?
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm sure that if we dig a little deeper, we'll probably see that he, might have had a band that he started. I think that's what I was trying to see, that he was an original band that he started and didn't just kind of float into all these were other situations. He was the drummer for,
It says he played for a short time with the Southern rock band David and the Giants in 1972. Then he auditioned for Black Oak, Arkansas. So he's already auditioning. He's not necessarily forming a band. I'm sure there's some band he formed somewhere along those lines, but.
Yeah, but it looks like, all those. Yeah, it looks like those ones that I mentioned were like, it looks like he started off in Black Oak, Arkansas, which was a pretty well-known 70s band. So,
I mean, he's played with some like heavy hitters of the 70s and 80s for sure.
Oh yeah. So anyway, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Tommy Aldridge.
And currently with Whitesnake again.
I know, it's great. It's amazing that he's still with them or back with them. I mean, Whitesnake's one of those bands that when you look at, you on Wikipedia, you look at like sometimes they have the timeline of the band, like where the people are. Whitesnake's just scrolls down. There had to have been like 30 people in and out of Whitesnake over the years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So next up, we've got, which we recently talked about, August 15th and 16th, 1972, Made in Japan live performances happened, which made it to the final album. So I think we've covered that enough in our Made in Japan episode. Go check that out if you haven't already. And then August 16th, 1980 marked Cozy Powell's last gig with Rainbow before leaving the band. Another kind of, much like Tommy Aldridge, just played with everybody. I mean, he was all over the place.
Yeah, another great drummer.
Another great. So that kind of wraps up the history this week. And feel like we just kind of go into like a Zen meditation now leading up to our Burn review, which I've been listening to while I've been working out. I've been listening to it on the drive to work. I've just been waiting and still sticking with my strict guideline of not listening to the album until we get there. So I was like, as soon as we were done with Who Do We Think We Are, I was like, I was already listening to the opening riff for Burn. So very excited to really, really dive into it.
Me too.
So much good stuff. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Check us out on our social media. And, I don't think I talked about it, but listen, if you're getting some value from this, join the ranks of the Holy Trinity there and become a patron. Ruin the Holy Trinity. Make it a holy foursome or whatever. Contribute on Patreon. And please leave us it doesn't cost anything to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and that helps new people discover the show. If we're giving you some value, give us some value with, at the very least, a simple review.
Yeah, come on.
Don't
do it.
Don't be a boner. just give us a review, for God's sake. Okay. Anything else to add before we close it up this week, my friend?
I am looking forward to Burn.
Oh, yes.
That is what I have to add. I'm just telling everybody that I am very excited because what an album. Look, it's right behind you there. Just seeing it makes me happy.
Yeah, I just had to warm it up. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We will catch you next week when we dive into the album Burn.
Yeah.
Until next week. See you later, my friend.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Purple Podcast. If you like what you hear and would like more episodes in the future, please donate on Patreon to support the show. You can also give us a rating on iTunes to help new people discover the show. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for show updates. See deeppurplepodcast.com for more details. Thank you for listening.